Today, I'm going to answer the question for you. How strong are NFL players? We'll put it in context of how strong some of the strongest people in the world are, and could they compete in some type of strength sport? And are they truly some of the strongest people in the world? On the surface, of course you want to say yes. And I've been on record saying the second that NFL players find a sport like strongman, we're all going to be out of work. But is that actually true? Now, I've gone through a whole bunch of different players, but NFL players come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Of course, the positions are hyper-specific more than any other sport. You'll have guys like Vince Wilfork, guys like Jared Lorenzen, internet sensation, all the way to guys like Aaron Donald and DK Metcalf. So some of these guys look like they are absolutely unstoppable animals, and some of them look like they're absolutely unstoppable at McDonald's. So let's go through some of the guys who would fall on this list of strongest NFL players of all time. The first, and this is a guy who I followed as a late teen, and probably one of my inspirations for loving to get into heavy strength training, and that is James Harrison. He played on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he does crazy workouts online, and he still does crazy workouts online, even though he's well retired. He's done a 175-pound hip thrust for several reps. He does a lot of banded earthquake bar stuff where it's hard to really know how the weight is affecting him, but he's bench pressed 545. That's more than I have bench pressed. He's power clean 315 for 3, and true power clean. Technique wise, he's not dropping his hips at all, basically just pulling it up to his shoulders. And he's done dips with about 200 pounds of added weight. All of those numbers are definitely up there, but definitely pushing power is well in excess of his power otherwise. For context, the best bench press of all time is slightly short of 800 pounds, so he is well off of that. But when it comes to, say, a strongman, we don't bench press in competition, so really, benching 545 in our world would be really, really good. Next up, there are two guys who have been to World's Strongest Man who have played in the NFL that I can find. The first is a guy named Bob Young, and he was actually in the inaugural World's Strongest Man competition in 1977, and he ended up coming in second place. The person who beat him was a weightlifter who outweighed him by about 40 pounds. In 1979, he competed in World's Strongest Man again and came fifth. Now, some of his numbers are insane. He deadlifted over 800 pounds, which at that time was absolutely absurd, and he squatted allegedly 550 pounds for 22 reps. For context, the legendary Tom Platz squat set is 23 reps at 525 pounds. So he effectively did way more than that in terms of cumulative volume. I have beat Tom Platz's record. I'm the only one to ever do it. If you want to check out that video, check it out up there. But Bob Young, World's Strongest Man competitor. There has been NFL and World's Strongest Man crossover, and he was actually doing that in the off season, which is a pretty remarkable statement. Certainly nothing that would be done now with the size of the contracts that the guys in the NFL get, but interesting to know that it has been done in the past. The next guy will not be happy that I'm calling him an NFL player, but he was drafted to the Green Bay Packers, and he's a fellow competitor of mine. We go head-to-head regularly, named Thomas Evans. He won the Amateur Arnold. He basically won every big amateur competition possible in 2022, broke onto the scene in 2023, and is having a really good, successful strongman career. I think most people would have him ranked somewhere between 6th and 10th in the world at the moment, certainly holding his own. And the thing about NFL players, we're going to run into this over and over as I continue going through these guys, they don't really deadlift. That's not a core movement for them. The risk reward, they just don't find it to be there. And frankly, I agree. I think everyone should deadlift, everyone up from a sedentary person all the way through to World's Strongest Man. But if you have sport-specific demands and that doesn't fit within a particular movement, especially when you're strong, it's probably best to leave that alone and focus on the movements that are going to promote your performance in the sport. And frankly, deadlifting for football, there's really no huge purpose for that. So Tom, his deadlift is coming up for sure, but in terms of everything else, he is absolute world class. His squat is incredible. His overhead press is incredible. And really, he's got the makeup of someone who could win World's Strongest Man. So he could be the first NFL drafted player to win the World's Strongest Man. I think Thomas Evans is capable of that. Now, next up is potentially the most impressive lift that is on this list. And his name is Ethan Evans. Now, Ethan Evans, he deadlifted 770 for 2 reps. This is an incredible feat of strength and something that not a whole lot of people in the world could do. Let's say his 1 rep max would be around 800 pounds. 362 kilos is not that heavy when it comes to strongman. We do reps at 360 kilos, and we'll do it, the good top level competitors will do that for anywhere from 6 to 9 reps. The catch though, is this man is a punter. Now, going back to being hyper specific in the NFL, you've got your linemen that are huge and strong. Then you have your skill players, which are your quarterbacks and receivers. They're often more agile, they wouldn't be as absolutely strong, but incredibly explosive. You've got your running backs and linebackers who would be very strong, but also incredibly mobile. Beneath all of those, in terms of requisite athleticism, is your punter and your kicker. It will help if you are stronger, but it's certainly something that I'm sure many, many punchers and kickers over the years have completely neglected. But 770 for 2 for a punter is absolutely absurd. So hats off for being able to do that. Last guy with impressive lifts, before I go to some of the less impressive lifts, is going to be Justin Ertz. Now, Justin Ertz has the record for the bench press at the NFL Combine. That's 225 pounds for reps. There's no pause, you can sort of bounce, but you just have to lock it out and get it to your chest. 225 pounds for 51 reps is an incredible feat of muscular endurance, not necessarily an incredible feat of strength. Now, I'm sure this man could bench well over 225, of course. I'm sure his absolute max would be incredible, but it is a bit confusing to me that the NFL still tests for muscular endurance against 225 when there are much better tests that will directly relate to the football field. But it is the place where they put a barbell in their hands and we can look at about what can you do. I would imagine I'd be capable of somewhere around 40 reps with 225. I think in this case, Justin Ernst would have me beat. Now, Justin actually didn't play in the NFL. That's just the NFL Combine record. I have one last man who I believe to be the most impressive strength athlete within the NFL of all time. His name is Isaac Sopoaga. He grew up in Samoa, and he said that he worked out by lifting bags of coconuts, by throwing rocks up at coconuts, and by lifting trees. Very Samoan stuff. I imagine if this wasn't true, it would be a over stereotype. But Isaac apparently did that. And his numbers are insane. A 500-pound bench and over a 700-pound squat. There are incredible lifters in the NFL. You'll notice that we're basically getting bench press numbers and squat numbers, with the exception of our punter friend, that deadlift is just not really something they do. Overhead press is not really something they do. And the interesting thing is, you wonder, what's the strength and conditioning like in a football program? Because for me, if I was doing strength and conditioning for someone trying to play in the NFL, you think like a lineman is going to be hinged over. You're not bench pressing your opponent. You're sort of like incline pressing them. So I would have incline presses and shoulder presses and stuff in there as well. But maybe it's a little bit guided by the NFL Combine system as well. And interesting, I think a lot of people wouldn't know that as guys progress throughout their career, they're actually going to train less and less in the gym. Not because they get lazy, because their body's getting beaten up and they need as much recovery as possible to get game to game. So peak strength for an NFL player, I would guess, would be within their first 3 seasons of playing in the league. Of course, then they get more skilled, they improve their awareness, they improve their knowledge, and then they're a much better football player after that. But in terms of strict physical attributes, that I think is when it would peak for most. Now, there are a couple of people who I'm not so impressed by, and one is Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas, he was the best wide receiver in the league a few years back for the New Orleans Saints, and he did a trap bar deadlift of 530 pounds. It was on pads that were an inch, and he was using the high handles, and he did it for a couple of reps, and they didn't look comfortable. For an NFL player to be just over 500 pounds picking up off the ground, to me, I was very surprised that this wasn't a higher weight or a higher number of reps or more explosive work. Really not a strong range. And for someone incredibly explosive, that is a little bit surprising, although I'll go into that in a second. Last up, the absolute worst, the lowest physical capacity of any NFL player. I'm sorry to this man, but Fred Smoot, not good. He is a cornerback, and he has the record for the lowest number of reps in the 225 bench press. One bench press. Fred, you probably should have just omitted that and probably should have not done that at your combine. 225 for 1 rep for a professional football player is absurd. And I'm sure his coaches know that, and his strength and conditioning coach knows that. But you go into any commercial gym and you could spot a good handful of members that could bench 225, never mind someone whose job it is to be fit, strong, fast, and healthy. But the thing is, he still plays in the NFL. So how can this guy play in the NFL and guys like Aaron Donald, DK Metcalf, James Harrison, all of those guys, absolute animals, play in the NFL? And there is the position-specific argument, for sure, where as a wide receiver or a cornerback, you don't need to do nearly as much strength and conditioning, pure work in terms of strength. You would be much more agile. So I imagine Fred's 40-yard dash time is incredible. Let me look that up just so I save the man. Fred Snoot's 40-yard dash. So Fred's 40-yard dash is 4.38 seconds. Incredibly competitive. He's a cornerback and not an overly large man. For context, 5'11", 172 pounds. And some of these big numbers, we're talking about men who are literally twice his weight. But position specific is important. But then what are the qualities you actually need to be a great football player? Well, if you're a lineman, you need to be able to be coordinated and powerful enough to push a guy off of you. But the guy himself, let's say it's an offensive tackle, they might be 320 pounds. He's not leaning his whole body onto you, so that 320 pounds, you might actually only have to push about 200. And the game becomes how powerfully can you push 200 pounds. So power is an expression of strength over time. The faster you can express your strength, the more powerful you are, and the better that's going to translate to the football field. So while some guys might not have these incredibly high lifting numbers, they will have very, very high power numbers, meaning that their 1 rep max might be 250, but they're as powerful to press 200 pounds as someone who benches 300 pounds slowly might be. That is the name of the game. You also have to think about how you coordinate your body and how you lean your body into them, and then you can get huge amounts of leverage without actually being that strong and just using your strength to the best of your ability. The other thing that football players need to be able to do is repeated sprints. In every single position, it is effectively a repeated sprint. And if you are too strong, your aerobic capacity is going to suffer for that. And if your aerobic capacity suffers, you might have a great first quarter. By the time quarter 3 and 4 roll around, you're mostly going to be destroyed and you're going to get absolutely run over. On top of that, your aerobic system has to be fit. And since we're doing repeated sprints, you also have to be explosive and agile relative to your body size. So the amount of work they would put in the weight room versus the amount of work they would put out on the field and doing sprint work, agility work, it would be at a much more reasonable balance than in someone like a strength sport. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is, are NFL players that strong? No, they're not. They're simply not that strong when you compare them to the strongest people in the world. That being said, I think they are much, much better athletes. In fact, I think most strongmen could admit we are failed football players to some degree, or rugby players, or whatever it may be. They are incredible athletes who have so many incredible physical attributes. And if they did put the energy towards a strength sport, I think they could be some of the best in the world. I would love to know your guys' thoughts. Go ahead, pop that in the comments. And if you have any need for a program, I've written it for you. Go ahead, check that in the pinned comments, moosecoaching.com. Would love to help you out. And if you want to support the channel, go ahead, pick up your Lift Heavy, Be Kind merch. Let's get everyone out there, get healthy, and get fit. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind. We will catch you tomorrow.